Besides the shower and the hot tub, food and beverages related scalds would be the next topic of consideration. Certainly hot coffee and hot tea remain standard issues of litigation related to whether the coffee or the tea was served too hot, and whether or not the patients were aware of the of how hot the beverage was, and issues of that nature that get related as to what is the standard of the industry and whether the franchise comply with the standard of the industry, and then issues related as to who was negligent are common causes of my expertise. Temperature and duration of exposure are the two elements that come across in all the areas of litigations in which burns have been involved. What was the temperature and what was the duration of exposure, because that would determine what is the depth of the burn and sometimes what is the pattern of the burn. Basically, this is a similar chart. It's a little bit a busier chart, but it relates to food and beverages related scalds. And as you can see in the chart, and I hope that is clear, there's also issues related to frying, baking, deep frying, not only issues related to hot water. Preventive measures related to children and adults. This is always a topic that comes into consideration. When we talk about adults, I'm talking here about the elderly. Certainly here it's very popular to sue nursing homes or similar institutions that take care of the elderly or the disabled, or and in case of children, of course, whether the parents are being negligent, and many of these cases, of course, involve foster families, step-parents, families that are not your typical families, and certainly even institutions where the children are placed. These are very, very common sources of injuries, very common sources of litigation, and the preventive measures have to be related again to the anti-scalding devices, to the setting of the hot water thermostat, to the presence of the attendant, to the presence of the person that is helping the elderly or the child towards the bath, and to when hot food is served and hot coffee or tea is around, to the appropriate considerations. So that is very important. Concerning the issue of pain, there is a question as to the difference in pain, okay, and the recovery time. The issue of pain certainly is an issue that is ever present in burn litigation, because many of the allegations surround the issue of pain and suffering, and I know that according to different states, the issues of pain and suffering are differently from a legal point of view. But I've been involved in several cases in which the patient ultimately died from the injury, but the area that was the source, or the major area of the source of litigation, was how much pain and suffering surrounded the injury, and how much pain and suffering was related to the daily dressing changes and treatments that the patient underwent in the burn center setting, even though the patient ultimately died. Second-degree burns are theoretically more painful than third-degree burns. As a matter of fact, one of the distinctions between a second and third-degree burn is done as to whether the patient has or does not have pain. But the fact is that a third-degree burn will then go to surgery, and once we do surgery, of course, and the skin is removed, then the area would be quite painful. Burns in general are associated with a great degree of pain. Morphine or similar medication has to be given IV practically around the clock. Many of these large burn injuries are placed in an induced coma-like state in order to take care of them because of the pain and other considerations. So there's always a great amount of pain surrounding this experience. And concerning the recovery time and pain, I would say that once the burns are covered with a skin graft, once all those raw nerve endings are covered, then the pain decreases dramatically, and then according to what is the area that is affected and the particular patient, certainly there will be a decrease in the amount of pain. Pain will continue later on, of course, after the patient is discharged, and many of these patients do require pain management once they're discharged. It's a little bit difficult to answer what difference would it make in the patient's recovery time. It would depend upon the extent of the body that was burned and the type of burn that was sustained, and of course upon the surgery that was done in the patient. There is another question concerning as to whether the age of the burn victim will affect the healing and scarring. The answer is yes. Typically, people at either extremes, either whether you're too young or too old, our skin is much thinner. Consequently, a burn that would only be a second degree in an adult may easily turn to a third degree in a child or in an elderly. And also, typically, the older you are, the less scarring you will produce. Consequently, young people and middle-aged people will tend to scar much more aggressively, will tend to develop hypertrophic scarring and or keloid scarring much more aggressively. And the older you get, the advantages of having a less rotund scarring is that even though you do not heal as fast, certainly the healing is not as bad. There's not hypertrophic scarring is not present, and keloid scarring is also not present as well, or not commonly present. So consequently, the older you are, you will have a better scar.